All right, so we've got some new data to share with you about just how viral those Hunter Biden New York Post stories went after Twitter and Facebook tried to stop the sharing of those stories. So this is from Signal Labs, and Mediaite had a report about it. Signal Labs found that the social network's ban of links to that New York Post story nearly doubled its sharing by users from about 5,500 shares every 15 minutes to about 10,000. The story had been shared more than 352,000 times between the time it was published on Wednesday and the weekend. Saagar, who could have guessed that by taking this insanely over-the-top approach to this one story that they would serve to actually highlight that story much more than anyone was ever going to pay attention to it if you would just let it run its course?
Yeah, I mean, literally the Streisand effect in action. Let's throw the Axios thing up there on the screen because it shows the exact same thing. You can see so clearly about how many interactions and how much it's gone viral on social media. I mean, this is what you and I were discussing yesterday, I think, during my radar, which is, look, I mean, the story itself is basically coloring in the lines of corruption that we already knew. I'm not saying it's not important, but it's not a game changer. Let's be honest. And I'm somebody very critical of Hunter and Biden and so much of the corruption that we see. But look, this is not something that's going to change the election, even if it is something that is significant as it is that we see. And so by blowing it up, and basically by having Twitter censor it, they made everybody in the world go, oh man, I need to know what is in that report. So ironically, they made it way more of a bigger issue, and they got the media complicity angle. And now, we can see over and over again, so many different elements of the story are being confirmed from separate email chains. And there was a photo floating out yesterday from showing Joe Biden actually meeting with a Kazakh oligarch client of Hunter while ever he was the vice president. You can just see quite clearly that the substance of the story itself is true. And all they have done is shine light on these facts when, if they had just let it go, if they had just let the New York Post story go, I think it maybe would have been a 1 or a 2 day story max, and it never would have gotten the coverage on all the networks that it did.
But you know what? I don't know that their goal was really to actually shut it down and actually keep it from getting a lot of attention. I think their goal was to signal and basically virtue signal that they were on it and they took it seriously and that they learned the mistakes. And so I think this kind of proves a point about a liberal tactic in general during the Trump era, which is rather than engaging in an argument, rather than engaging with people that, you not only disagree with, but may find abhorrent and unconscionable, rather than doing that, it's an attempt to just shut down those arguments and shut down those conversations. And I think just like we see with this story, it creates a backlash effect where you actually end up giving the very people that you want to disempower, you end up handing them more power. Because it's a very human psychological thing to be, oh, well, if they can't say it, if we can't even talk about these people, what are they saying? And why can't we even ask these questions? It gives them more power than they actually deserve. But I also don't think that a lot of liberals, I don't think Twitter really cares. I think they just want to display for the world their own virtue rather than actually try to move the country in a better direction or actually move towards any particular outcome. It's all just about putting on display their own morality.
You couldn't be more correct there. And we have the perfect demonstration just for everybody. Twitter announced basically with no warning that ahead of the election, they won't allow you to retweet stuff without careful consideration. So basically, you hit the retweet button. It's as if you're about to quote tweet something, and then you can still retweet because they think that retweeting amplifies anger and misinformation and all that. And all of that might even be true. But then why just before the election? Isn't it always an ever-present concern? It's exactly as you said. This is virtue signaling. They're like, no, see, we tried to tone things down ahead of the country. Look, social media platforms are a reflection of us as a society, not the other way around. I'm not saying that they don't influence things and change, but it's human nature. You have scandal. It's not like the Hunter Biden thing is the first time this has ever happened and that media didn't try to cover it up. You can go back and look in our election history in terms of scandals and so much more. They're a reflection of us. And so they're not interested in trying to tamp things down and amplify better content. They just want to cover their ass ahead of a very contentious political time. But again, that's a reflection of our politics. That's not on Twitter or Facebook or anything else.
Well, it's just so ham-handed to be like, we're going to do this 2 weeks before the election. And they even say it'll last, through the end of the election. So it's just very specifically targeted at this one time period. And you're exactly right. It's not like they really care about the discourse, because the fact of the matter is, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Google and YouTube, like, they've benefited from their business model kind of relies on the coarsening and that heated discussion and debate and the anger and the divisiveness. They make money off of that. That is their whole business model. So they want to put enough out there to be able to say, look, we did what we needed to do. If Donald Trump gets elected again, it's not our fault. You can't blame us. Don't be mad at us. It's all about CYA. They don't actually want to change the tenor of the conversation, because the fact of the matter is, the way that you design these social media platforms does in fact have a large impact on the way that conversations unfold on these platforms. So it isn't like their hands are clean and there's nothing they can do about it. It isn't like it is just an accurate reflection of us, because you see the tone and the tenor on these different platforms can be wildly different between Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and how that conversation unfolds. But the truth of the matter is, they kind of like the way that the conversation is right now because it's profitable for them. So they're going to make these little tweaks to demonstrate that they're on team resistance and that they shouldn't be blamed if anything goes awry. But the reality is, they're self-interested actors in all of this, and they are only wanting to signal to the country that they are good and moral actors without actually taking the steps that they would need to change the tenor of that conversation and move the country in a better direction.
Yeah, exactly right.
All right, we'll have more Rising for you after this.